Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I know we've been a little bit short on posting episodes lately, but there have been so many good ones that you could catch up on. Today is Easter, nicht gestoigen and nicht geflogen, as we Jews like to say. And you should watch the episode about Jesus, for instance, how Jesus was not a Palestinian, since that discourse is very much with us on this very day when he allegedly rose from the dead after spending a lonely night, a lonely Shabbos by himself in a coffin.
He didn't do that.
He didn't what, spend the night in the coffin?
He didn't rise.
Okay, then he spent Shabbos in the coffin and stayed longer in the coffin after that. I'm just saying, if he happened to have risen up, it was kind of mean to leave him in there for 48 hours.
We
I don't really see the point. And the point also is that it's 48 hours. It's not 3 days. These Christians can't count.
That's true.
Yeah. And that shows you I will argue that this is the break between Christianity and Judaism, because the Goys can't do math. Okay, if you want some math done, you have to turn to the Jews, or I guess the Asians technically, but there weren't any floating around the Middle East at the time, because the Christians can't count. It's not the third day.
I'm not so great at math, and I'm Jewish.
Okay, now they count obviously Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but I looked it up. I said, how could they have buried him on Shabbos? Because I realized on Friday that, wait a sec, Good Friday's Friday, and it would have been Shabbos. His execution finished at 3 p.m. and they buried him then. I was under the impression they left him on the cross for several days. Isn't that why the Mel Gibson movie is like 12 hours?
Something like that. But wasn't he taken to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to be cleaned off and everything?
He would have had to have been. And then Joseph of Arimathea comes in there somewhere, and I know that from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But that's the extent of my knowledge of his burial. But he was buried before the sun went down, because it occurred to me you can't have funerals on the Shabbos. If he was, hanging from a cross all day on Friday, and it was hanged, he wasn't nailed to the cross. They actually used rope binding. The Romans did that quite often.
All right. Now that we've offended our Christian audience.
Okay, well, that's fine. We haven't said anything to offend. You're the one who said he didn't rise from the dead. I said he might have risen. I just said their math was off. Okay. And I said, and he had to spend Sabbath alone. That's all I said.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not questioning the resurrection here.
I'm agreeing that I'm kind of participating in the offending of our Christian audience. Do we even have a Christian audience?
What about your friend there, Mark Clark, the superhero?
That's true. Yeah, there's Mark Clark.
Yeah. So where's his crowd? Shouldn't he be bringing the flock to us?
We need some more Christians on the show.
Tell him to go tell it on the mountain, and that we are here and everywhere.
Yeah. On that note.
All right. So that our topic.
I want one more thing about the Christians. I just want to, now that I've offended them, I want to thank them for their support of Israel.
Well, some of them. I could think of a lot of Christian churches that don't support Israel.
Evangelicals, I want to thank them.
Yes, evangelicals, I thank you. Though my friend Moti Enberry in Jewish Studies has done some research, and it's not so clear cut. There are generational divides, among other things, in there. It's really interesting stuff.
I talked about that too in my talk I gave down there at Wilmington.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were here. I remember. We wrote a statement while you were here. So yes, it's true. The evangelicals, while I might not agree with your theology and much of your politics, I do thank you for your support.
I agree with a lot more of their politics than you do.
Yeah, but you're a Republican.
Right.
I'm not.
I know that.
Which is why I don't agree with their politics.
Right, I know. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Nevertheless, we appreciate the support, much as I appreciated Trump's executive order on anti-Semitism. Good policy can come from a bad regime. I hate the man, but I thought it was a great policy. Nothing wrong with that.
All right. Well, on that note, let's move on.
All right. We're not talking about Trump today.
We're talking about Rutgers.
Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about a very disturbing university at this point, and I know that narrows it down to maybe about 18 to 20. But it has now been put under investigation by the federal government, and it is a university that has frequently cropped up in the news relating to Jew harassment, the propagation of anti-Semitism. There's one professor there in particular who claimed that Jews systematically, or Israelis systematically harvested organs, thus reviving the blood libel myth in modern garb that some people like Mira Sukharov refuse to recognize. But this school is, of course, Rutgers. And I'm going to turn on screen share now because we've got some interesting things to share with our audience. All right. Well, just I pulled up one newspaper headline here just to show what we're talking about. This is House adds Rutgers to list of schools under anti-Semitism investigation. Now, this is really terrific, and I appreciated what they had done with Harvard and Penn and MIT back in the winter, I believe it was.
Is this your congressional representative?
Oh, I guess she is. Well, she might not. Do I have no idea.
This is her district.
Yeah, it's the house. It's the house. It's by district, so she might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I believe my two ones or my one is male, as far as I know. I remember
Oh,
seeing his
all
name.
right.
I haven't voted in one of these elections yet. I voted last year for the first time. I've only become a citizen 2 years ago. So now okay, so Rutgers, we're going to go through the report itself. We are fortunate to have a copy of it, and we're going to analyze some of the details. But before I happen to have seen this report, there was a professor from Jewish studies at Rutgers named Michal Raucher, who I believe is a specialist in religious studies. She writes about Jewish reproductive rights. That's her specialty, and that's what her work is on, which somehow makes her an expert on anti-Semitism. Go figure. She is an associate professor in Jewish studies at Rutgers University. And she writes, sensationalizing campus anti-Semitism isn't serving Jewish students like mine. Okay, well, okay, obviously free speech, yada, yada, yada. I just highlighted a few parts of this thing. Then there are a couple that are really, really disturbing. First and foremost, I do want to say that, yes, there is sensationalizing going on. I don't even know if it's deliberate necessarily, but it's just how the news cycle works. No one's going to publish a story in the New York Times saying everything is quiet at name your university, right? They don't do that. They only write stories when things actually happen. So I don't think there is any deliberate act of sensationalism going on here. There's no shadowy Jewish org like the ADL or whoever else who are overly exaggerating what is going on. I don't know if you could say overly.
And I'd have to say that prior to October 7th, and I've told you this before October 7th, I thought that a lot of the reports on anti-Semitism on campuses was highly exaggerated. I
Yeah.
thought, but October 7th changed my mind on it. I don't.
Yeah, you told me you didn't think anti-Semitism was that bad in this country before October 7th, and you sent me a text message a few days ago saying we have lost. Anti-Semitism is fully back and it's not going away.
Right.
Yeah, so Adam has changed his mind, and that's what we historians are here for.
And what's that?
That's what we historians are here for, to help guide the political scientists who are lost in the weeds and don't see.
Well, we political scientists respond to the data that we see before us and change our minds on that. But I do think that there has been a significant shift since October 7th.
There's been an uptick, and more people have felt bold enough to express their views. And it seems that the people who are horrified, who weren't before, are a handful of very small number of Jews on the left who would have considered themselves part of the social justice universe, let's say moderate people in the social justice universe, who have come to realize with a degree of horror that their non-Jewish colleagues and students are really anti-Semites. They're still there. These are the people who we've talked about before, some of them, and they've tended to remain silent since then. They haven't exactly become activists on the other side, but they're keeping quiet, it seems, on most of what's going on. Now, of course, there's still a lot of Jewish studies people, Exhibit A, who are, going on. Our Shmigegi of the Year, Omer Bartov, Mira Sukharov, Sasha the Twerp, you name it. I mean, these people insist on every day on getting on social media and accusing Israel of genocide and whatever else, or telling us to see things from the perspective of the other side. Now, again, seeing things from the perspective of the other side, absolutely. I'm a historian. I teach, and we do that in the classroom. But, when people are chanting, globalize the Intifada, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You guys are baby killers. I'm not going to try to see things from their perspective at that point, because that is just anti-Semitism. There's no way around it.
Well, they don't want to see anything from our perspective. They are the ones that are not interested in civil dialogue.
Yeah. Absolutely not.
I will sit down and talk to anybody that wants to calmly discuss what's going on in the Middle East and look at both sides of the matter. I've done that on a few occasions with Palestinian sympathizers that were not in the category of the kind of people we're going to discuss today. I have no problem with that.
Right, but the point is there is that category of people that we are going to discuss today.
Right.
Okay, I mean, in my classroom, I do this all the time. I talk about the Palestinian perspective. Now, when it comes time to talking about globalizing intifada and stuff like that, I don't necessarily consider that the Palestinian perspective. I consider that sloganeering on campuses in order to intimidate Jewish students. That's not the Palestinian perspective of why they think they're being
Could be.
oppressed.
It could be.
It might be, right?
It might,
We don't know because we're observing this from.
we don't know. I mean, there has not been a global intifada yet, but when people say globalize the intifada, I'm going to take that seriously.
Yes.
I'm not gonna just ignore that and
And
say,
you're not going to walk into one of their demonstrations holding a Jew flag saying, I'm a Jew, I'm here to talk.
I will not do that.
No, because you will get into an altercation with somebody, and it'll probably be a physical altercation.
That's right.
And as a professor, you need to keep away from those things involving students. Otherwise, you could land yourself in big trouble. So here, okay, Michal writes, even as the news streamed out of Israel and Gaza, as the death toll rose and the reports of horrors grew more disturbing, yada, 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 my students made the choice to return to class twice a week. Good for them. They're paying a shit ton of money to go to Rutgers. Actually, Rutgers is a state school, so I don't know. They recommitted to learning about the history, trauma, and conflicting narratives of Israelis and Palestinians. Each time they entered the classroom, they challenged all those who were mocking the importance of context and painting college campuses as traumatizing spaces where it was dangerous to learn. Well, I don't necessarily agree with the final part, but she's doing the right thing in her classroom. I don't dispute that one bit. This is what you should be doing, right? As we just discussed a minute ago. You're trying to get people from multiple sides to discuss things calmly, right? I have no doubt that students are experiencing anti-Semitism in both subtle and overt ways. Anti-Semitism is part of the cultural history of American universities. And yet, I don't think my experience in the classroom since October 7th has been an outlier or should be ignored amid the dire reports painting academia as hostile territory for Jews. Do you see where the problem is in these two sentences?
Oh, I gotta reread it.
She totally shifts the goalposts, if that's the right expression to use in this context. The second sentence doesn't follow from the first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First one could be referring to these demonstrations on campus. The second one refers specifically to what's going on in our classroom. Okay, we know that most of these incidents are not taking place in classrooms. We know that already, right? There's no news there. And if they are, people aren't reporting them. We should teach them how to face their fears and untangle the differences between, say, actual threat of violence and the political opinion that challenges their core beliefs. I don't know if globalize the intifada, I mean, it is a political opinion, but it's also a threat of violence.
Well, look, the Jewish students are not the ones that need to hear this advice.
Yeah,
and that are involved in SJP, they're the ones that need to hear it.
I'd like to point out that Wilhelm Marr, the man who coined the term anti-Semitism, his book, The Victory of Judaism Over Germandom, was also a, quote, political opinion. Okay, so just because something's a political opinion doesn't mean it's a threat of violence. The two go hand in hand. And I could show you an image from the Republican candidate that I sent you yesterday just to make that point. It is very much a political opinion, and it's also a threat of violence. Okay, here's where we get to the real problem here. Sensationalist reports of campus anti-Semitism harm Jewish students by making it difficult for them to reap the benefits of a college education. The danger of this kind of inflammatory rhetoric is that Jewish students come to see everyone on campus as a potential threat. I want to point out one thing here. She's on a campus where there are a lot of Jews, but on campuses where there aren't a lot of Jews, and one of these things happen, the Jews are scared out of their mind because they don't know who they can talk to anymore, right? There's so few of them that unless they're lucky enough to have a Hillel house they can go to and hang out, they're on their own. They're spending most of their time with non-Jewish people. Rumors about left-wing professors who might grade Jewish students harshly, which has been documented a few times, keep Jewish students from taking certain classes. I don't think a Jewish student should sign up with Joseph Massad or Noura Erakat. I think that would be sheer idiocy on their part if they want to be openly Jewish in their classroom from everything that I have read. Text messages and emails that warn about protests on campus that might terrorize, quotes, Jewish student, discourage them from being curious about their peers. Silencing guest speakers robs students of the opportunity to assess controversial ideas for themselves. This kind of
what happened to Jeff Bledinger? I mean, he wasn't even allowed to speak,
I
right?
know Jeff Blutinger wasn't allowed to speak, had to be escorted out by a police car, and now he's being harassed on his own campus. Now, there's several problems here. Okay. Now, text messages and emails that warn about protests on campus that might terrorize Jewish students. That does happen, and as far as I know, Hillel's policy is to do that in general, just to tell students to keep away if they know of a thing coming. Yes, these things are bad. You don't want to be out there as a Hillel student, openly in a group of Jews at one of these protests. If you want to go and subtly watch what's going on and document it, more power to you. But you shouldn't go out of curiosity about your peers. What does she mean by curiosity? To dialogue with them? Are you going to dialogue with people who are holding up signs saying baby killers? Hi, can we chat for a minute? You've just accused me of being a baby killer.
She makes it sound like it's like some kind of little quiet, retreat in the library or something that this is all happening at, and not
Okay.
these very boisterous mobs and riots.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And you just pointed something out here about Blutinger, and I missed this last time. Silencing guest speakers
That's what I'm
robs.
talking about.
But you see, here the point is the first part of the paragraph, she's talking about Jewish students. But the silencing of guest speakers is happening from the other side, yet you're reading this and you think she's talking about Jews. Because
That's why
Jewish
I keep
students,
saying it's not the Jewish students that need to read this. She's preaching to the wrong people.
it's not
It's
only that, no, she's actually lying in this sentence. She's lying and claiming that Jewish students are silencing the other side, and they're not. I've seen no evidence of Jewish students silencing
I've
Palestinians.
never seen that. No.
It,
Okay,
I'm
so
sure it's
maybe
happened.
there might be some cases of Jewish donors that have done that, right? But I don't know Jewish students have done that, and I'm not aware of any Jewish professors that have done that.
Yeah, but she's not talking about donors calling for an event to have the plug pulled on them. She's talking about, actually crowds coming there and silencing the speaker,
I
given it's,
understand. I know what she's talking
yeah,
about, but
and it's a complete and utter fabrication.
it
There's
is
no
a fact.
basis for what she's saying here. Additionally, these kind of reports threaten the safety of Arab students. Here we go, all lives mattering to Jews again, and faculty who are implicitly or sometimes explicitly cast as threats to Jewish students. Now, how many Arab students have been attacked by Jewish students that you know of?
By Jewish students,
Yes, Jewish specifically.
I don't think any have.
Yeah. Okay. So don't make this about us being the violent ones. You can say, but you guys are the colonialists in the Middle East. Even if we are, let's just say for a second, Israel is colonizing Palestine in the Middle East. This does not mean that Jews hold the cards and are the oppressors on campus. And Mira Sukharov did that in an article when she used that stupid binary of oppressor versus oppressed, as everyone in her universe does. But she did quite a sleight of hand there by saying, well, in this case, Palestinians on campus are the oppressed and Jews are the oppressors. No, we're not. Maybe in the Middle East, if you want to argue that,
That
argue it.
oppressor versus oppressed framework it's got to go.
It
It's the
does, but it's also an outright
cause.
lie. It's also an outright lie when it comes to campus. It's just misconstruing the facts.
It's an outright lie when it comes to everything, and it's the cause of all political stupidity.
Well, it's a framework, so I wouldn't call it a lie. I'd
It's
call it a
the cause of
fundamentally
all
flawed
political
framework.
stupidity. It is the cause of all division. It's the cause of all of everything that's wrong.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're 100% right. But if you want to look at Israel and say, Israel is the oppressor and Palestinians are, the victims, it's a flawed, fundamentally, incorrect methodology, simplistic, that should be thrown out by any scholar who has any
no room
legitimacy.
for nuance with it. There's no room for
Absolutely. At the same time, though, Israeli bombs are falling on Gaza, so you could take a snapshot and say, oh, I guess maybe that makes sense, wrong as it might be. But again, there's a major qualitative difference to saying that and looking at a college campus and saying that Jews are the oppressors on college campuses against the people of color from the Middle East, the Arabs, because of what's going on in the Middle East. Okay, there's a major, major leap there, which is foundationally wrong and actually endangers Jewish students on campus. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not saying the framework has any legitimacy, far from it. I'm just saying one is a flawed framework that does not get it to the heart of anything. The other one is an outright lie. All right. So, well, this is Raucher. I'm not going to spend any more time on this, but you see the point here.
They don't even treat it as a framework, though. They treat it as the truth, as the only lens in which to understand the world and history and current
Yeah,
events. They,
which
they
makes
the only analytical tool that they are capable of.
right. I'm not saying necessarily that this is what she does in her classroom. I don't know, right? Because this article doesn't necessarily point in that direction. The problem here is that she's willfully ignoring anti-Semitism on her campus, and I'll pull up the report in a second, and suggesting that her students throw themselves into the fire, which is very, very irresponsible. Okay, and not something I would ever do to my Jewish students.
Unless it's my hair that's on fire.
Yeah, shout out to what's his name? What the hell was that guy's name?
We're not going to mention his name on the air.
We've just mentioned 6 other people.
Yeah, I know, but we'll be we never mentioned his name before.
Are you working for him by any chance?
No, of course not.
Okay, just making sure. All right, well, here is the official report from the Committee on Education and the Workforce. Hey, nice logo. I like that. Is that the official American logo?
That's the official congressional logo, yes.
Oh, okay, great. I took my citizenship test, but they didn't ask about pictures.
Uh-huh.
All right.
We actually have a you know, kind of a bald eagle, a kind of a respectable kind of creature.
I'm well
You
aware of the eagle. Like I'm
you
well aware
guys
of
have a little leaf.
well, the eagle has been tied to, autocracy and fascism over the centuries.
True.
Yeah. So the leaf hasn't. Of course, maybe maple leaf trees colonized indigenous peoples' plants. For all I know, I haven't really looked into the subject. I'm sure someone has written about it if it's true, i.e., Palestinian olive trees, which we allegedly destroyed. By we, I mean the Jews collectively, of course. So I highlighted some of the good parts. This is the report, making a demand to the chancellor and others at the university, issued by the Committee on Education. And
I would have liked to be a fly on the wall in the offices when they received this letter and read it.
yeah,
Wouldn't you?
I'd love to, because they can't ignore it. After what they saw with Harvard and Penn, they can't ignore this.
Mhm.
They're probably busy, checking their resumes to see if any of them plagiarized their dissertation. That's what I would be doing at this point.
Yeah.
If I were one of them. Okay, I highlighted a few of the good parts. Jew hatred has become rampant at Rutgers University, and it has become clear that some members of the school's administration and faculty are complicit in allowing and even encouraging this hate to grow. Like at many other campuses, there appears to be selective enforcement. They just don't seem to apply when it comes to protecting Jewish students. Okay. So Michal Raucher, who wrote this op-ed probably just before this came out, but it was fairly close. I don't know how much of this was in the news that it was forthcoming, but there has been a lot of news reports about incidents at Rutgers. I pulled up a whole bunch of them that predate this letter, obviously. And they have mentioned some incidents here. Rutgers New York Center for Security, Races and Rights. You got to be suspicious of any campus department called or program. The Center for Security, Race and Rights has become notorious hotbed of radical anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Israel, and pro-terrorist activity. CSSR Director Sahar Aziz, virulent anti-Semitism and support for terrorism. Okay. October 7th, 2023. All right. 31 tweets stating to assess Hamas's October 7th operation and the Israeli regime's subsequent response in isolation is to ignore over 75 years of colonial violence and the horrific consequences born out of the decades of oppression and attempted erasure.
Mhm.
Now, that's not the worst anti-Semitic language I've seen, to be sure, but it's still an utterly irresponsible thing, especially if he started tweeting these back in October before a ground invasion even occurred. I mean, let Jews mourn their victims first.
But see, that's the other reason why it's so frustrating to have conversations about Israel with Israel's strongest haters, is that it's always a rabbit hole that you have to go down. Like once you have them agreeing that what Hamas did on October 7th is wrong, and then they have a context that they want to put it in, like here they want to say it was 75 years of colonial violence, etc. And then you have to go down the rabbit hole of looking at exactly what happened in those 75 years and showing why Israel has had to do some of the things it's had to do. And then you go further down a rabbit hole because they bring up the Nakba in 1948. And then you have to have a conversation about that, and they can't let that lie. And then because they have to go down another rabbit hole and go all the way back to, Herzl and the World Zionist Congress. Like it's not 75 years of colonial violence to them.
Hey, Adam,
It's
you recognize the Nakba. You didn't put it in air quotes.
whatever. You know that I mean it in there end quotes. You know what I'm saying though?
I absolutely know what you're saying. And if someone brought this up in a classroom, I probably in about 20 minutes can give a very succinct explanation and show the responsibility of both sides culminating in the post-Oslo situation. I could do it. I'm not saying both sides are equally guilty, far from it, but I am saying I can show the agency of both sides here. Okay, there's no agency in a statement like this, right? The only thing the Palestinians have done here is what Hamas did. Okay, and there's far more that they did, including horrific things that Hamas did on October 7th, but also including more moderate things that, anyone encountering another people in an ethnic conflict will do, that Jews did too.
Again, that's the problem with that very simple-minded, single-dimensional lens of oppressor versus oppressed. This structuralism
Yeah.
doesn't give you any room for nuance. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, end of story.
Do you see how it feeds into anti-Semitism? Look at the next part.
Of
Aziz has
course,
made numerous anti-Semitic and pro-terrorism statements, including saying that American Jews are more privileged than Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian Americans, and signing a statement condemning Jewish Zionist nationals, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there's more to the quote. But, okay, so here you go. Suddenly it's about the United States and American Jewish privilege. We came over as immigrants like everyone else. I know a hell of a lot of successful Arab businessmen in this country. I'm trying to figure out how exactly they are oppressed. Palestinian ones too. I find it mind-boggling to make such a claim. The Jews go back 100 years. We were severely, okay, I wouldn't say severely oppressed in this country, but we suffered like any other immigrant group, and we crawled out of it, much as Muslim Americans have been doing for the past, 30 to 50 years. So this is an anti-Semitic statement outright.
and that's hard to call Jews privileged if they have to endure this kind of hatred
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
university.
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd to call us privileged in this sense. Well, okay, see, again, here's the whole problem with the word privileged. We are under threat of anti-Semitism, but that doesn't mean we don't have privilege, right? So the whole privileged framework for defining racism, as you say, doesn't work. One can experience racism and discrimination and still have financial privilege, much like, let's say, Hindu people in this country who are all have done exceptionally well, but do experience discrimination in various parts of this country. The same can be said for Asians.
I never ever liked this framework of privilege
No, it's
because
stupid.
everyone has privilege. There's no one or very few that don't have some sort of good fortune.
Yeah, when I grew up, the word
And
privilege was only used in,
everyone has bad fortune too.
no one used it in the context of academia to refer to a collective of people. I remember my parents saying, you grew up with all these privileges. That's the way the word was used back in the 80s and the 90s, right? Not as we're seeing it today in academia. 20th anniversary of September 11th, they sponsored Whose Narrative, 20 years since September 11th, a panel featuring pro-terrorism. Okay, obviously you have to be careful when they use the word pro-terrorism here. I'm not going to claim that's not true. Speakers including Sami Al-Aryan, a former University of South Florida professor who pled guilty, okay, yes, I'm sorry, this is pro-terrorism, pled guilty and was convicted of providing material support to the designated terrorist group Islamic Jihad. Okay, so I apologize to the GOP in the House. You're right, you have used the word pro-terrorism correctly in this context. Okay, this is outrageous, and it's offensive as fuck. Okay, I've only been an American for 2 years, and I consider this to be damn offensive to my country. To do this on 9/11 on the 20th anniversary, even leaving the Jews aside for a second, it's awful. It's genuinely awful. Justification, okay, justification of the security state, this is at this event, and promotion of hypermasculinity and a colonial gender and sexualized order of modernization and civilization.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Someone please explain to me, dear listeners, if you've made it this far, please put in the comments, What the fuck does this mean? I mean, I know what it means in academic jargon, but I want to hear someone explain this to me like a normal person. Okay? Intersectionality, it's all tied together, right? If you're a privileged Jew, you're white, which means you also have to be in bed with hypermasculinity. And colonialism is gendered because, of course, the males conquered the world, and in their binary opposition, colonialism and male. I'm starting to sound like Lenny Bruce here. If you're a colonizer, you're male. If you're colonized, you're female. If you're, it's like
let's look at this one by one. The justification of the security state, but that's what the state is supposed to do, is provide security, isn't it?
yeah.
So what does this mean, security state?
I don't know, but don't they have it in their name? Don't they have the word security in their name? Center for Security, Race, and Rights.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So they're an organization that's propagating security.
Yeah, but their version of security probably means something different. I
Okay,
don't know.
hence the quote. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, okay, I don't know what they mean by that. Like who knows? And the promotion
Oh,
of
well, that's easy. We went into Afghanistan and Iraq because of American security. That's what they mean here.
okay, that's what they're talking about.
Well, the
Well,
security part, yeah, that's not the hard part to understand.
other imperialist wars and interventions. Okay, well,
That's the easy part to understand. That's why I didn't underline
yeah,
it.
but it's not terribly easy either, because right, that it's, why call it the security state? I mean, if they just left it the way it was before that part, I would get it.
It's in air quotes because they're doing it in the name of security. It's a so-called,
Oh,
it's
okay.
bad. It's bad. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a poorly constructed phrase, but that's what they mean. And yeah, I mean, there have been plenty of wars fought throughout history, arguing that it's done in the name of security when in fact it's a war to justify other things. I am not saying that about the invasion of Afghanistan or Iraq. I am simply saying that's been done. I mean, it's part of the Soviet playbook. It's part of the Putin playbook.
No, for many
It's
people,
part of the conquering of Carthage, as far as I know.
many people it was for security, and that doesn't mean that everybody had the same motivations. But anyway, let's not get into
No,
that.
this is the more interesting part.
A promotion of hyper masculinity. Um, what are they saying is it a comparison again to the security? Is it about the security state again? Isn't this right? That the warmongers are hyper masculine or something like
I
that.
guess so. I guess anyone who makes war, the martial people, modeled on the ancient Romans, which led to the emergence of the self-hating Jew, who was cowardly until the negation of the diaspora happened with Zionism. I guess the state is hypermasculine.
I once read, and you're the historian, I'm not, but I once read that most of the wars that took place in Europe during the time in which monarchs ruled, most of the wars were waged under queens, not kings. I once read.
Century, please. I don't know what you're talking about. Given that Queen Victoria pretty much reigned the entire 19th century, it'd be very hard to, disprove what you're saying.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But England was basically a democracy at that point. It's not on Victoria's watch.
I think I think that this was earlier on, like the Middle Ages.
They didn't really have queens in the Middle Ages.
They did.
To quote Seinfeld, they didn't have roommates in the Middle Ages. What are you talking about?
They have like yeah, it would have been much later on. Would have been much later on, but I think it's before Victoria.
Okay, England had what, 2 or 3 queens before Victoria? They didn't have many.
But I mean, like France and Spain.
France didn't have any queens.
That's true. Spain did, though.
Yeah, I believe in the
Maybe.
Ferdinand and Isabella. One wonders whether Isabella could have been queen without having Ferdinand.
And look,
And she wore the pants in the family, from what I understand. Sorry for that very gendered.
I'm just shooting from the hip here. I'm just mentioning something I read a while back. I don't have the data to really explain.
Well, every time I hear someone say the world would be so much more peaceful if women ran it, I always tell them to read a book by Wendy Lower, a really good Holocaust historian, called Hitler's Furies. And it's about women who actively participated in the Holocaust, like right at the front lines. You know, they might not have necessarily been holding the guns all the time, but they were very much active in very, very impactful, sorry for the word, ways of having the Jews murdered. So yeah, that's kind of bullshit. Okay, but a colonial gender and sexualized order of modernization and civilization, what the fuck does that mean?
By the way, there were medieval queens.
Okay, who you got?
Eleanor of Aquitaine, Empress Matilda.
Who was Empress Matilda? I know Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Um, oh no, she was just a spouse of a king, so that doesn't count. But there's several. Matilda of Flanders. Anyway, whatever. Let's move on. It's not terribly important.
Matilda Flanders, she's right up there with the Kaiser and Stalin and Prince Metternich, one of the great ones. Bring on Matilda. Okay, she's responsible for colonialism. Okay, so that undermines their whole theory. So colonial gender, okay, once you get the masculinity, obviously the colonial gender and sexualized order of modernization and civilization. Now, I just want to point something out here. Yeah, modernity as originally conceived is misogynist. The Enlightenment thinkers, they didn't have a good word to say about women. Hence, Olympe de Gouges, her Declaration of the Rights of Women, which led to her beheading. But let's put this in a comparative global framework and risk being called an Islamophobe here. If you're going to argue that somehow the US going into Afghanistan represented a hyper-masculine and oppressive male culture taking on a gendered colony in a way where the gender relations were more equitable than what was going in, you're nuts. There's no other way to put this. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't. It's somehow our civilization is, you know, misogynistic because of our militarism. And you look at the Islamic world, up to and including today in many countries, and it's absurd. It's utterly absurd. I mean, obviously, you know, misogyny is a big part of, you know, modern history in the West, but it's far worse in other parts of the world. So lumping it in with
if the feminists claim that there's no natural difference, well, some feminists claim, but not all, that there's no natural differences between men and women, then it wouldn't matter whether it's led by a man or a woman.
I think this is more discursive stuff though than actuality, right? It's the cult of masculinity than it doesn't make any sense, and nobody should take a course on this stuff because they're going to be wasting their time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, and do you really think the people fighting back in these colonial worlds aren't hyper masculine as well? Do you really think they aren't breeding their own militaristic hyper masculine culture? I mean, it's such an absurd idea. It makes absolutely no sense. Even if you look at the PFLP, okay, which, you know, as a Marxist organization was closer to being gender neutral or gender, whatever the adjective is for parity, than any other rebellious movement coming out of the Islamic world that I could think of at the moment. But the women, like Layla Khaled, they had to take on masculine attributes in order to be on an equal footing with the male terrorists, right? It's still a very masculine culture, a hyper-masculine culture over there. So this is all complete bullshit, okay? And somehow these idiots get the legitimacy to run an academic center.
Mm-hmm.
3 days after October 7th attack by Hamas and against Israel, the center hosted a webinar called Psychoanalysis Under Occupation, Practicing Resistance in Palestine. During the event, then George Washington University assistant professor Lara Sheehy, who remains a CSR faculty affiliate, blamed Zionists for the largest single mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust, claiming that Zionist settler colonialism is a structure that is the provocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So again, it's just saying the same thing about framework, except it's putting it in far more offensive terms, literally, you know, the day that 3 days after it happened. And again, it's utterly absurd, right? You can launch a rebellion without butchering women and children. It is possible. You know, if they went in and only killed soldiers, then yeah, obviously it's an invasion and we fight back, but it's not butchering to the same degree. So yeah, this is just offensive on so many levels and endangers Jewish students on campus, I will add. There are just so many of these. Columbia professor modern Joseph Mossad. Okay.
So that's the thing that really strikes me as interesting about this document is just how much is in there.
Yeah, it's nuts. But here, I highlighted this one for a reason here. So Mossad's on campus speaking, December 23. West Israel and settler colonization of Palestine. Mossad was subject of substantiated complaints for yelling at a Jewish student who questioned his views, saying, if you're going to deny the atrocities being committed against Palestinians, then you can get out of my classroom. And asking a student to identify himself as an Israeli military veteran, how many Palestinians have you killed? Okay. This person's a student. It's not that he's in it. His military service is immaterial. I teach at a school with a lot of veterans, people who have served in the American Army, obviously. And if that person is enrolled as a student, a speaker is not allowed to say that to the student. It's just off the charts. And if Mossad were an employee at that university, and the university wasn't anti-Semitic, he would be put on immediate suspension. Oh, look, the Latino center's in it. I wonder why they're not Latinx.
It's a good question.
Okay, Sitmar. Okay. The Latinx Center refused to advertise a joint event between the center and Rutgers Hillel. And why were they even having the event? On social media due to Rutgers Hillel's association with Israel. Capitalist issues serving Zionists. Do the Zionists own the university? I mean, come on. These aren't even Palestinians. This has nothing to do with Palestine. Rutgers, New Brunswick, Associate Professor of Africana Studies. Noura Erekat's not even in Islamic Studies or Palestinian Studies. She's in Africana Studies. As a Noura Erekat is awful, by the way. We could pull up her faculty page or her Canary Mission page, or I invite our viewers to do that.
Related to Saeed Erekat?
I have no idea. If she is, she should be embarrassed. If she is, he should be embarrassed. They both should be embarrassed for each other.
He died, though.
Oh, did he die? When did he die?
During COVID. Of COVID.
Yeah, Saeed Erekat, he was a pain in the ass, but at least he was at the table trying something. I'll give him some credit for that.
He wasn't one of the worst.
No, I don't agree with him, but at least he was at the table trying. You got to give him, post Arafat, trying. Which Abbas made a little bit of an effort for a time until he went, ballistic and full out anti-Semitic again. She justified the kidnapping of civilians as a military tactic. Well, I suppose it is a military tactic if we throw out all the so-called rules of war, and then I guess it is. Erekat also lionized Khadar Adnan, a member of the terrorist organization Palestine Islamic Jihad. I looked this up. This is on the Canary Mission page. Palestine Islamic Jihad as a martyr for freedom. Okay, so this is someone who was convicted for terrorism in Israel. He's the one who died in the hunger strike in Israel, I believe. Rutgers, New Brunswick professor of women and gender studies. Oh, Jasper Puar, here we go. Has made a career of whitewashing anti-Semitic blood libel in The Right to Maim, Debility. We've talked about this book on the show. Puar claims that the state of Israel deliberately disables Palestinians, writing of a complementary logic long present in Israeli tactical calculations of settler colonial rule. 2016 lecture amplified the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that the state of Israel has a policy of kidnapping Palestinian children to steal their organs. Yeah, okay. Tenured professor. Oh, microbiology gets in the mix. Michael Chikindas has a long history of blatant anti-Semitism. Well, he is a microbiologist.
It's not just the anti-Sem. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Whoops, I don't know what's going on here. There we go.
Adam, are you talking? Yeah, you went a little, yeah, go on. You were saying something about microbiology?
This thing is gone though. Where is this thing?
You don't see the screen?
No, I don't see the screen anymore.
Adam's having vision trouble on the mic. Is anyone here a microbiologist?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
We're keeping this in the video, by the way.
We're keeping it in the video?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. The problem is I'm getting an incoming call on my FaceTime. That's the problem.
Oh, on your computer. Okay.
That's the problem. And okay, all right.
Do you not have a do not disturb mode on your device?
it doesn't work. Part of the problem is that my new hearing aids, I get the phone ring coming into my ears, whether or not I'm on the ringer, whether or
So
not the
you're hearing bells.
I'm hearing yeah, I'm hearing the phone ring. Yeah. And
Oh, I
it's
think you're just hearing bells ring.
disrupting everything.
The
All
bell
right.
toll, the bell tolls for the gross part. Hey, that's two Seinfeld references in a minute. Not bad. Okay, yeah. So what you're saying about a microbiologist?
I didn't say anything about a microbiologist.
Hmm.
What I was trying to say, and by the way, your screen is gone. I don't know why.
Well,
What I was trying to say is that it's not simply the anti-Semitism, the Jew hatred. That's big. That's a problem in and of itself. But the lies that they're telling. I mean, a university is supposed to be dedicated to the truth, and they're teaching outright lies.
yeah, we know
And
that.
and university graduates go out into the world and they believe this
Is
nonsense.
this screen back?
Yeah, everything's back.
Okay,
All
good.
right.
All right. Now, hold on. First of all, he's a professor of microbiology. If any of this shit enters into his classroom, then he is not teaching the subject he was hired to
That's
teach,
true.
and he should be investigated. But what he's done on social media, Fed Reserve in Wall Street, stereotypical Jews with titles, internet spying, pornography, wars for Israel, and sex trafficking. All the traditional stereotypes are here, right? Money, porn, loyalty, dual loyalty, and international prostitution trade, which admittedly 100 years ago, the Jews played a very important role in it for reasons we will not get into, but certainly do not play any role in it today. And a cartoon of a Hasidic Jew stealing money from a child in poverty and saying, be a patriot goy, somebody's got to pay $10 billion to Israel. Really? Okay, well, good. I'm glad these people are being put under investigation. And Michal Raucher wants her students to go dialogue with this guy's students. Alleging Jewish responsibility for the Armenian genocide. That's writing in a social media post. We must not forget that the Armenian genocide was orchestrated by the Turkish Jews who pretended to be Turkish. I mean, okay, the guy's a biologist, so this is far worse than anything the intersectionalists could produce. I mean, this is just so off the wall. It's not even worth our trouble. We'll let the Department of Education handle it, and I'm sure they will. If you're listening to us, Republicans in Congress, we're doing your work for you here. Actually, you did the work for us. We're working together. All right.
Well, in my state of Ohio, the Republicans wanted to require that that professors only discuss the subject matter of their classes in class, right? Now that I was against, right, because I think it violates academic freedom, and I also think it's kind of a vast overkill, to the problem. I don't
I
think
don't
that.
even know what it means. I mean, what if I'm talking about, imperialism in Europe and or ethnic nationalism and the emergence of Zionism? I'm not going to go talk about Irish nationalism for a couple of minutes if I find it relevant. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't think that is really what they had in mind. They didn't want professors talking about politics in classes that had nothing to do with politics.
Right. But I'm saying if you're in the humanities or social sciences, there's very often ways of and the need to further education of bringing things in that might not seem
That's
directly.
why it's a stupid solution. I
Yeah, I mean,
understand.
I teach Jewish history as global history. That's my whole point, that the Jews are a global people, and it's an alternate lens to view world history.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have to go through any more of these. I think this is pretty clear. We're occupying the business school, and we're here all night. Okay, that's SJP. SJP was suspended at Rutgers, and I believe they've received a 1-year suspension, in which students masked with keffiyehs called for the elimination of the state of Israel through a global intifada, dying as a martyr. Okay, this is pretty terrible. Okay, SJP members glorified and promoted terrorism and engaged in anti-Semitic chants, including stating, dying as a martyr, dying as a hero is one of the greatest sacrifices you can do as a Palestinian and as a Muslim. In this context, martyrdom means suicide bombing or going out and raping and murdering. Okay, it's the second intifada and 10/7. There's no way around this. There's absolutely no way around this. This is what martyrdom is in modern Islam. Even if that's not what it meant traditionally.
They will always say that what you just said is not what it is to us today. Like they will always, they're very good at moving goalposts.
Well, screw them, they're liars. I mean, if
So
you want to go through the entire history of Islam and find martyrs who are not terrorists, then yeah, I guarantee you'll find them. But
now they say that martyrs are just casualties, you know, or jihad is just a spiritual.
it can be that, and it was
But
that
not when
probably.
they are used in this context.
Absolutely not. Not in the way whatsoever. Symbols get and terms get reappropriated. Here, I want to just mention this for a second. A student who was Jewish and African American had a swastika drawn on their door. Now, I'm assuming that doesn't come from the woke Hamas alliance. I think that's reasonable to assume. But for anti-Semites on the right, and here's a key point, they see this as an opportunity because they see the anti-Semites on the left getting away with it. And they figure, great, now's our chance. And that's why anti-Semitism, whether you think it's just some signaling to a certain group of people, and I know I very often accuse Trump of doing that, whether that is absolutely correct or not, the point is the anti-Semites on the left are also going to interpret that as signaling that anti-Semitism is okay, and they're going to get on board, even if the original intent had nothing to do with that, right? It's creating a climate of anti-Semitism. And that's exactly what's happening now by allowing the left to get away with this. And it shouldn't be done. So I don't think we have to go through any more documents. We're running a bit long, but I do want to raise one subject of conversation that has come up here with the kafia, but I'm going to turn off screen share. We don't need it. So I will turn it off, stop screen share. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of the ADL, who's been a major disappointment. And you know, I did get a chance to speak to him on the phone once, which I suppose is one of the most well-known people I've ever spoken to, besides the Fonz. He stated,
you would have had to have any kind of expectation that he would be good to be disappointed.
At one point, I thought he was okay. If I'm going back 5 years, yeah, he called me in 2017.
I never did.
He called me in 2017 after I wrote that article about JVP, which got a lot of circulation.
All right.
He called me. Someone said he set up the call. I answered the phone. Can you please hold for Jonathan Greenblatt? And I said, sure. And he spoke to me for about 5 minutes, and then he went under a tunnel, and our connection went dead. And I said, I will never let go. And that was the end of it. So. And since then, he's been a major disappointment. He tweeted the other day that the kafia has become the equivalent of the swastika. What do you think?
I saw the meme once that called it a hipster swastika.
Okay, well, again, you have all these idiots on the left who, just because they know how to use Photoshop, think they're good at making clever memes. But do you think, is there any merit to Greenblatt's claim that the kafia has become the equivalent of the swastika?
Well, yes, I think that there is. In that is how we see it. Like for us, it is a symbol of hate. It's a symbol of people that want to murder us.
It's funny, you wouldn't admit that about the Confederate flag the other day, but let's not go there.
What are you talking about?
Well, because it's something you're saying it's a matter of interpretation. But again, I don't think the swastika is a matter of.
It's like I was telling my students in Israeli politics class last week, a kafia means completely different things to different people. Like, so for us, that's what it means. It's like a swastika. But for pro-Palestinian sympathizers, it's a symbol of freedom and liberation. Or many of them.
I don't think okay, you know what? I disagree with you on two fronts here. Okay.
All right.
One, I think you're giving the kafia too much of a pass, and one, I think you're being too harsh. Okay, you're giving the swastika a pass then. The swastika is not a matter of interpretation.
I never said that it is.
You said the kafia is a matter of interpretation, much like the swastika.
I honestly don't know anyone that interprets a swastika any differently.
So it's not
even neo-Nazis understand the swastika as hate and the desire to murder. Like they don't even try to sugarcoat it.
Okay, better comparison then. Would you say the kafia is the equivalent of the Israeli flag?
Yeah, because the Israeli flag means different things to different people. It means exactly what the kafia means to us, to certain people.
I agree with you that in the context of Israel/Palestine over there, yes. But over here, I'm having a hard time accepting that because these people who go into these demonstrations are using these keffiyehs to cover their faces. And the only people who cover their faces when they go into these demonstrations, yeah, they claim that they're being spied on by the state, but don't take that seriously here at this point. They're doing this because they plan on doing vandalism and they plan on intimidating Jewish people.
Some people that are like that. I don't. I think that maybe that that's why the keffiyeh is actually a lot more like a swastika, because just like the neo-Nazis identify the swastika with how we identify it, there are actually people that identify the keffiyeh with how we would, but I think a lot of people
There's some who
also,
don't.
some that don't. And in
Yeah.
fact, probably most don't.
Okay, and again, that's not the case with the
I
swastika.
see, for example, students around here wearing keffiyehs once in a while, and I don't believe that they really want to mass exterminate the Jewish people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Which is why I would say that the swastika is a terrible comparison, even if it might trigger Jews in certain ways.
No, I don't know what Greenblatt meant by that, but I will say that
It's true. Greenblatt's an idiot. Maybe we're putting too much.
for me, when I see a keffiyeh, my reaction is the same as if I saw a swastika, right? So that's why it's the same for me.
Really?
Yeah, why?
If I saw a swastika drawn on my campus, I would call campus security and report it.
Because a swastika is universally considered a symbol of hate.
That's my point. The keffiyeh isn't. If I found a keffiyeh around a tree, I wouldn't go and call it.
All I'm saying is that my reaction, the fear that I feel from it, is the same.
Okay, well, you're a bit of a snowflake.
I'm not a snowflake. I see it worn by terrorists.
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. I get that. Okay, but then the Palestinian reaction to an Israeli flag is fully legitimate too. Then the way that the Palestinians react to an Israeli flag.
Well, that's what I said before.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that it is, and that's that's something that requires a certain amount of thought. I don't have a good answer for that, but because it's also the symbol of an independent state, right? And its origins are not tied any way whatsoever to the oppression of Palestinians, right? It's an ethno-national symbol with an element of it that's historically Jewish and has nothing to do with really Israel in many respects.
Ultimately, symbols are subjective, right? It's really a matter of your own psychology.
But they all have an objective origin, and I think the origin is important to take into account.
Well, but that origin, though, is not objective. It's the interpretation of that origin could be subjective.
No, I looked up the origin of the keffiyeh online, and it was part of a symbol that was drawn, but the keffiyeh in its current form is a symbol of Palestinian resistance. It's not a traditional Palestinian head carving. Head covering. There is something that looks similar to it.
What is that? What is Palestinian resistance?
Well, whether it's moderately violent or terroristic or, a peaceful march to the fence of Gaza, it does involve.
Is it allowing for coexistence or from the river to the sea? Like, which is it?
I don't believe it's an allowing for coexistence. I'm sorry, I don't.
Some might, though. I don't either. I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah, people like Mira.
Some might.
I don't think it does for many. I think the people who interpret it that way are misinterpreting it. But there is that margin of interpretation.
This is odd because I'm from I'm not one that believes in moral relativism. This is not a morality thing. It's about symbols, which don't have any existence in nature. They're man-made. They're constructed. They're social constructs. So we have different. You can't just say that the origin is one thing and one thing only and move on.
Well, the origin is something. It just takes different meaning depending on what context it's used in.
Yeah. And how the person's seeing it.
But I have a hard time, seeing a whole group of people chanting from the river to the sea, wearing them, and thinking that some of those people in that group actually mean peaceful coexistence. I've got a very hard time believing that.
Because if they're chanting from the river to the sea, that's not a symbol. That is an assertion. right? That is a statement. You're actually saying that from the river to the sea, the Jews are going to be gone, right? That's what
Now,
you're saying.
given as far as I know that this symbol, I mean, again, I didn't read too carefully on it, is not some sort of Palestinian cult or Arab cultural symbol that goes back a very, very long time in its current form. I don't see why the peaceful people would want to be associated with it.
With the kafia?
Yeah.
Uh,
If it's come to mean terrorism,
reason that I just said, because they don't see it that way.
but they also recognize that it does mean horrible things for horrible people.
What horrible things for horrible people?
Terrorism for the people who are chanting from the river to the sea.
Well, they recognize that they see people using it, maybe not in the context that they would use it themselves. So,
All right, we're not going to resolve this. It's let's just say that the swastika is sort of in a class by itself. Okay, a better example. You're right about context. I have a flag of the USSR, and I've had it hanging on my wall. Not at the moment, but I haven't had it at various points. It's utterly meaningless here. 30 years after the Soviet Union collapsed. It's Soviet kitsch I bought when I was over there. But would I invite a Ukrainian family into my house, with that on the wall? I mean, probably not. Like, I wouldn't do that because they would get deeply offended by it. So I think that's actually a good example to compare it to. All right, let's end off here. I think this was a very interesting episode. And go Congress, go Department of Education, take these bastards down. They deserve it. And by they, I mean the administrators at Rutgers. I'm making no claims about students or professors.
I want to see more things, not just at Rutgers, but many other universities where this is a serious problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye. It is 79 degrees out, and I'm going to go take advantage of that.
Okay. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.